Okay, so this is going to show you how to make a treasure chest that can be clicked on, and the top of the chest, the lid will open up when you click on it. Now, this is something that you could design externally from Unity, say in Blender, or buy it from the asset store. But again, the idea is try to give you as many tools as possible for your prototyping and for your proof of concept before you start having to reach out to the graphic developers and start purchasing assets. So, this doesn't require a lot of explanation at first because it's just a matter of going up to Game Object, 3D Object, and Cube, okay? And then it's just a matter of assembling these cubes together. So right now I'm just positioning it in front of the camera, so nothing special about this. Just move it a bit closer. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to make a bunch of these cubes and just scale them down to size. The actual size really doesn't matter because you can take your final prefab and scale it as well. But just in case, if you want to avoid that, in the application I'm going to use this for, the default size of objects is 1 by 1 by 1. So if I want something to center nice and neat, it needs to be smaller than 1 by 1 than 1. So I'm going to make it smaller than that. That's all. There's nothing, other than that, there's really nothing special about the sizing that I'm about to choose. Since this is going to be the bottom of the chest, you don't want it to be too tall. And you really don't want the walls to be very thick. And actually, let's zoom in a little bit more. So that's the front of the chest. And so if we copy that, that will be the back. And we'll rename that back. And we'll just move it a certain distance. Again, the distance between this and this, I want it to be less than 1. That way, like I said, it doesn't exceed that 1 by 1 by 1 constraint. But again, that's for my usages. You can do whatever you want for yours. And then we'll just copy this again for bottom. Just going to rotate that. So it looks like that is the X. It starts getting confusing once you start rotating these and copying them, remembering exactly which parameter is which. And we'll just create a whole new block since we've already kind of messed around with those. Let's lower this down. Let's see, so let's shrink that. We said 0.05 is the width, so let's try to be consistent with that. And a lot of this is just little tweaks to get it to look right. And we said the height was 0.5, so this should be 0.5 plus the thickness beneath it, so I believe that would be 0.55. So doing a little bit of math does make this go a little bit easier. Well, actually, that didn't quite work out for some reason. Okay. do just 0.5 then. And, oh, that was just a typo there. Okay. And just slide this one over. And you just want to decide which sides you want to take precedent over which sides. So do you want the front? Do you want this edge to show? When you think about it, a chest isn't nice, neat, and smooth, that you do get the distinct sides of it, so don't think it has to match up exactly right. And we'll just rename these sides. Now, nothing says that you have to do it with just that few. You could actually take another cube and put it here, and here, and here, and here, and give it like 4 prongs or 4 supports. So I'm just going kind of simple about this. You certainly can elaborate on this if you want. Maybe you want to give it a certain color or add a texture. You can right-click, create, and you can do material. Maybe you want to be like maybe you have a different type of chest. Maybe you have like a bronze chest, a silver chest, gold chest. So maybe this one is silver matte. Just click up. So with the material selected, you just click up here and you choose like a gray color. And then metallic. And if you notice down here, this will give you an idea what it'll look like. You can make it more metallic. Maybe make it kind of shiny. Now, because of the environment it's in, you won't really notice that much, because obviously you need things around it to reflect on it and things like that. And then you just drag and drop that onto the various objects. Now, we're going to be a little lazy. We're going to take this, copy it, scale it vertically, and flip it, and that's going to be the top of our chest. And so we're going to take these, copy, paste, and where this says bottom, we're just going to rename this to top. And we're just going to move this up in between. You don't want to drop it on one because you're not turning it to parent and children. Just want to make it easier to have a demarcation point between these. All right, so we're going to select this. And I don't think we need it to be apparent to do the scaling. Let's take a look. Click on this button and just scale it vertically. No, that's fine. And now we'll move this up. And now what we're going to do, looks like we didn't get the bottom. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a cylinder here, because this is what I want to explain. Right now, when you rotate an object, it will rotate on that object's center. So if we take this top and we say, okay, let's flip open the chest, watch what happens. It's rotating in the middle. Completely and utterly wrong. You don't want it to rotate in the middle. You want it to rotate along that back edge. So what you do is you create a hinge, much like a real chest would. Like a real chest would have a hinge. That is the parent. And then that means everything rotates based on that. So watch what happens. First, let's get rid of all these collider boxes because that's going to be a separate issue. So remove component. Now game object, 3D object, cylinder. Let's reduce that to like 0.1. 0.1. And in this case, you want the X and the Z to match, or else it wouldn't be circular. It'd be like oval. So unless that's the effect you want, otherwise you really want it to be circular like a hinge. And we need to make this smaller. And even smaller. Depending on whether or not you want people to see the hinge, you don't even have to make the hinge the entire width of the chest. And that is definitely too wide still. So let's try 04. 04. That's good. And we'll make that silver as well. So now we're going to rotate this. So we want to rotate it like that. So we want to rotate it on its Z axis, which makes sense because Z is the depth. So rotation 90. Let's take this. And actually, while we're looking down there, we'll fix the bottom. And just like a real hinge, you want it to be kind of outside the box. Okay, so there. And for this to work, it really doesn't have to be centered left and right. You just want it towards the back here. Now what we do is we take the top, the sides, and the front, turn it into a child to the cylinder. Now what I do to the cylinder, the rest will follow. So I rotate the cylinder, and everything else rotates. So it looks like that needs to be 270, which makes sense because every 90 degrees is a right angle. So 90, 180, 270. Or turn it the equivalent of a right angle, I should say. And now we just lower this. Okay, the problem is, it's a couple. The cylinder, since we got rid of all the collider boxes, all right, we really need the cylinder to have the collider for the entire box, because what happens is the script is going to be attached to the cylinder. So with all the other collider boxes, if you're clicking on them, nothing's going to happen because the functionality is attached to the cylinder. So the cylinder should have the only collider box. But we're going to make it so it encompasses the entire chest, so effectively there'll still be a collider there. So, cylinder. Let's get rid of the capsule collider. Add physics box collider. And let's start scaling this. So, like, let's do 5, 5, 5. All right, so now we should be able to start clicking on some of these points. Okay, so that comes to the front. It stops at the side. I'll have to rotate it to confirm that one. Let's raise this up. Lower this down. See it peeking out the side there. That looks about right. A little bit clipped on the side there. So I'm going to extend that one out a little bit. Raise that up a little bit. Doesn't have to be quite the whole distance. Because the thing is, if the collider box is too small, people will be clicking on the box and be like, why isn't it opening? What the image looks like is irrelevant. What matters is the collider when it comes to collisions. Okay, so almost done. What we're going to do now is we're going to right-click, create C# script, and we'll call this chestcon, short for chest control. The other thing is also, let's make that a trigger. Because if that collider is solid and you're around other solid objects, it's going to bump into them and then things are going to start moving around crazy, and you don't want that to happen. So as a trigger, potentially causes issues where the box might be able to be walked through and things like that. But again, there are other options. So we're going to take that chest con, we're going to put it on the cylinder, going to open it up. Don't mind the other scripts. For those of you who are following my Minecraft tutorial, that's what those are for. They will have no impact on what you're seeing here. All right, so pretty straightforward. Outside of start, outside of update, void on mouse down, case sensitive, which means that won't work. Let's try it again. Let's get rid of that. So on mouse down. And I strongly recommend whenever you add new functionality, particularly collider and click functionality, always test it. But in this case, we can test it pretty quickly because there's only one thing we want it to do. But usually I'd recommend putting in a debug just to make sure that the collision is actually working. So what we're going to do is, since we want the cylinder to rotate, we're going to add what's known as angular velocity. So what we're going to do is, to do that, we need another physics object, and that is a rigid body, and we get rid of gravity. Again, you're doing this just to the cylinder. The collider is just on the cylinder. Rigid body just on the cylinder. The bottom of the chest is all child to the cylinder. Excuse me, the top of the chest, the top lid is all part of child to the parent cylinder. The bottom is not. The bottom is still its own object. So on mouse down, what do we want to happen? We want get component. What component? That component we just added, the rigid body. What do we want to do? We want to add angular velocity. And I'm probably going to get this wrong. So it's a vector 3. I think we want it to rotate on the X. Like I said, it gets a little confusing when you start rotating these things around. So let's have it rotate 0.5, and we'll drop in the letter F, because if you use a decimal, you have to use the letter F, so Unity doesn't get confused. 0, 0. So this is X, this is Y, this is Z. So we're saying we want it to rotate this one, this axis only. All right, let's see if this works. Beautiful. And see how it's rotating on the hinge? Let's actually move this close. Let's move it down so it's a little bit more obvious and a little closer. So what I was saying about the collider, if we didn't extend it out, people could click along the edge and have it not open. But this is good enough. You know, someone should click in the middle and see it's rotating on that hinge. And so now you just want it to stop after a certain amount of time. And what do you want it to do? So rather than having... There's a couple ways you can do this. You can create a coroutine that stops it after a certain amount of time. So what you can do is... So IEnumerator, and we'll call this stop opening, because that's what you want it to do. Take this, paste it in here, and now we set the angular velocity to 0 because it's opened enough. But we need a timer, because that's the whole point of using IEnumerator. So let's see if I get the order correct. It is yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds, and we'll say like 0.4, and again need the letter F. So as far as what does this do, don't worry too much about the exact meaning of each word. Just the big takeaway is that after 4/10 of a second, this will happen. But something needs to tell the system to go out here. So in void on mouse down, we start this moving, and then we say start coroutine, parenthesis, and there's that routine we just created. Okay, so that was kind of brief. Yeah, let's do 1 second even. Just keep in mind, if there's something behind it, you don't want since the rigid body, since the collider box, the box collider is since it's a trigger, it'll go right through whatever's behind it, so you don't want there to be any clipping issues. All right, that's still... The other thing we could do is we can bump up the speed. Like this is only 0.5. We could do 0.75. And maybe this could be 1.1 F. Again, dropping that F as soon as you start using decimals. And we'll just leave it at this because maybe you want to open slow, fast, whatever. Maybe it's a timing issue. Maybe it's a puzzle where it takes a few seconds to open, that kind of thing. Now, maybe you also want some kind of glowing, particle system to be coming out of it too. So that we can do too. We can either instantiate a particle system or have the particle system already inside of it, and that you just can't see it because it's inside of it. So that shouldn't take long. Let's do particle system, and let's make these particles much, much tinier. So start size like 0.1. Start speed 1. Start lifetime 1. It's a cone, so come down here to shape. You can see it's a cone, so you don't want it to come out too much. You can also shrink the diameter. Let's push it down. Let's see how that lines up. So the top of the chest is -4, basically 0 and -7. So -4, 0, -7. So -4. Nope, that's not working right. Okay. So let's do this. There we go. Shrink that inside a little bit more. Move that over. Now we'll just look at it from the other side. Okay. So there. Now let's look at it from the top. Getting there. All right, so it looks like it just needs to go up and then we're okay. So we don't want them to be coming through the lid. So let's reduce the lifetime to say 0.7. A little bit still coming out there. So 0.6. Let's shrink diameter in a little bit more. And let's really increase the emission. It starts at a really low 10, so let's make that like 200. All right, let's see how that looks. You can kind of see that because the lid isn't quite closed. But you get the idea that it's that easy. And then you could just mess with that particle system as much as you want. You could put a couple in there so it's more the width of this. You could turn this out into a little bit more of a cone. You just have to be careful so it's not coming out the front. So I think that's about it. So you now have a clickable, animated treasure chest with a particle system inside. So that should do it for this one.